How do you do, fellow pony fans? Unfortunately, I have a lot going on outside of YouTube right now, but I still wanted to get you guys a review of My Little Pony Friendship University. So I'm going to do one of these kinda scripted vlog style reviews. Anyway, let's get right into it. My Little Pony Friendship University is okay. Let's start with the plot. Basically, Twilight and Rarity hear about a competing school of friendship, because we need more than one of those in Equestria, apparently, and they go to investigate. And of course, it's run by none other than Flim and Flam. And honestly, these guys are one of the best things about the episode. Flim and Flam are always very funny in that 1920s con artist way that they have. They have a lot of energy, and they're always fun to watch. One of the big twists or dilemmas in the episode is the fact that their friendship school is supported by none other than Starswirl the Bearded, who I'm happy to see, and I'll get more into him in a minute. Anyway, it makes for an interesting challenge for Twilight, where she needs to go against the judgment of someone she respects to kind of go with her gut instinct about the school. Because, of course, Flim and Flam are totally running some kind of scam, and actually, it's fairly interesting how they do it. Basically, admission to their school is free, but you need to pay a high price for the specialized worksheets and paperwork that go along with doing the lessons. So, really nice little con operation there. I also like the fact that Twilight and Rarity need to do some actual detective work to figure this out. It's not, like, super obvious. They need to go undercover, and there's this moment where they get into some disguises, and honestly, I thought it would have been a good opportunity to do, like, some actual nifty magical disguises or something. But sadly, no. They just went with some really lame-looking disguises, and they kind of write it off as a joke, Thor Ragnarok style. And to the episode's credit, the lame disguises don't really work very well. The problems I had with the plot are, one, it's set in Las Pegasus, and we spend the entire episode in this shoddy-looking kind of pseudo-office building that they have the school set up in. The other thing I didn't like about it is the fact that it looks like it's actually gonna be kind of a challenge for Twilight. Not that it's a difficult thing for her to figure out, but more like a moral challenge. Like, oh, wow, maybe Flim and Flam really do have something legitimate to add to the friendship school canon. But no, they're like using all of Twilight's developed learning material, and it's just a complete nothing from them. So Twilight is just clearly the moral better here. And the way the episode was going, it looked like she was actually going to have to acknowledge some personal faults, but nah. Alright, next up, another thing I liked about the episode is the number of cameos we get. First off, we have Flim and Flam as the bad guys, and they're great. Also, I liked seeing Starswirl the Bearded, but he's not really well utilized, you know? He's really more there as an authority figure that Twilight respects, who's kind of been led down the primrose path. He doesn't really do any, like, cool magical stuff like you want Pony Merlin to do. Like, there's this scene where Rarity sort of pulls on his beard and he doesn't, like, teleport her into another city or something, which would have been funny to see. Also, at the beginning of the episode, he talks about how he's been around for 1,000 years, and he really hasn't. Okay, so it's kind of like what happens to the protagonist in Fallout 4, where he or she gets cryogenically frozen and sent forward in time, essentially, like 200 years. That does not actually make them 200 years old. You're more like a time traveler than anything else. Starswirl is, I guess, old in pony terms, but he's not that old. There was some timey-wimey stuff involved. Finally, she's only on screen for a second, but Treehugger was in there, and it was just neat to see her again, because Treehugger's really funny. Alright, let's talk about one of not just the biggest problems I have with the episode, but one of the biggest problems I have with this season. Chancellor Neighsay is a bad antagonist. Because really, he's just a lazily written character. He has no actual reason to be doing what he's doing. Like, he doesn't have an argument. Oh, creatures other than ponies are going to use friendship as a weapon against us. He doesn't even know what that means, and he admits that in this episode. That is just poor writing, especially for an antagonist. And an antagonist, in order to kind of run a story, needs to at least be decently well written. If you're going to mess up on something, you can mess up more on your protagonist and their motivations than you can on your antagonist. To make things worse, Neighsay really isn't an entertaining villain. And you can kind of get away with a weak motivation for a villain if your villain has a good screen presence. Like, let's not pretend that Discord's motivations for doing anything are reasonable, but he can get away with it because he's fun. A lot of more silly properties work well with these kind of fun, entertaining, upbeat villains. Whereas Neighsay, he's essentially a real downer. And without some kind of legitimate argument or some kind of point you can see, he really doesn't work. I'll say the one really good decision they made about him was the voice actor for him. He sounds really good. It makes me wonder how much better he would sound if the stuff he said actually made sense and was compelling. Alright, let's move on to the comedy in the episode. It's not really that good. It's okay. Twilight has one really funny line about Flim and Flam just being transparent con artist scumbags. And as much as I think it would have been cooler and thematically better for them to do something more interesting with the disguises, I thought that the super lame Party City disguises for Twilight and Rarity were kind of funny. Finally, let's talk about the song. I am not a fan of the music by and large in Season 8, but that being said, I think that the music in this episode, there's only one song, I think it works well for what they were trying to do. In Season 8, the My Little Pony songs are really less actual, like, songs that you would hear on the radio and more like these kind of operatic pieces which advance the story. The song in this episode basically serves the same role as the song in Super Cider Squeezy 6000, where it's Flim and Flam giving their con man pitch to a bunch of hapless rubes. So really, it's just a photocopy of Trouble down here in River City. But again, they can get away with it because that kind of song is not that complicated. It really just needs to start off fairly slow, hit a big crescendo at the end with a lot of people singing in unison, and have a lot of quips in there, and it kind of works. We don't need to worry that much about chorus and hooks and bridges and all that stuff that goes into like a pop song. Alright, so my final verdict. I'm going to give this episode a 3 out of 5. Friendship University has some decent ideas, and I don't think they're really well executed on. And it's really kind of held up by decent antagonists in Flim and Flam, and an interesting dilemma for Twilight, even if all of that kind of doesn't really work out well by the end. Alright, thank you for watching my review of My Little Pony Friendship University. If you're interested in more reviews of anime, movies, TV shows, comic books, or video games, check out my channel right here on YouTube.
Hey kids, today's show is brought to you by the letter 4 and the number potato! I'm a stupid private.